Now, this month marks 2 years since the infiltration of M23 rebels in North Kivu, east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, attacked armed forces near Rwandan and Ugandan borders. Civilians remain the most impacted as communities continue to face terrorism, abuse and even murder, leaving those who are fortunate to having to flee refugee camps for survival. Despite several interventions, peace talks and negotiations by the United Nations, African Union and other oversight bodies, the violence and humanitarian crisis does not promise an end in sight. We take a look at the events unfolding there and why interventions have not succeeded in what that conflict with regional governance expert Tendai Mbanje. Tendai, I appreciate your time this morning. How have the recent developments in the M23 Rebellion impacted regional stability in the Great Lakes region?
Thank you, Hugo. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I think the resurgence of the M23 in the Great Lakes region is a signal of failure of the region to execute its mandate in addressing issues of peace and security. This conflict has been in existence for years now. DRC in general has been in conflict for over 2 decades, and the M23 rebel has been on and off and signing peace agreements with the government of the DRC, and the government of the DRC on the other hand has failed to implement peace agreements that it had with the M23 rebel group years back. So you realize that the recurring conflict or the recurring aggression from it's a sign of failure of utilizing regional mechanisms that we have. The Peace and Security Council of the AU, for instance, it has a mandate under Article 7J to ensure peace and stability of the continent using available regional mechanisms. I mean, we have so many instruments, and the African Charter itself, which is the foundational document for African states, provides, in Article 23, provides for the right to peace, which the regional mechanisms need to prioritize, because peace is the foundation of all governance and peace and security and anything you can name it. So, and as well as the United Nations itself has been present in the DRC, one would assume that as the presence of MONUSCO in the DRC could have made a difference in trying to provide early warning mechanisms around the resurgence of this military rebel group. So it's a failure for utilization of the available regional mechanisms that are there in the continent here.
So you talk about regional utilization, but it almost seems continental, Tendai, when you think about it. I mean, we talk about Burkina Faso, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia. I mean, just to name a few. But there is conflict everywhere on the continent, and it seems that it's more continental than it is about a specific region.
I think I didn't hear you there. I think my volume, you could perhaps increase the volume.
Can you hear me now, Tendai?
Yes, I can hear you.
So my point is that there are many conflicts across the African continent. There's Sudan, there's fighting in Sudan, Burkina Faso, Mali, just to name a few countries that have gone some form of conflict or coups in the last few months. So this seems to be an African-wide problem more than it is a problem that we can ascribe to the Great Lakes region alone.
Yes, certainly. You realize that it's not a secret. It's that there has been a UN report that has provided evidence of the presence of the Rwandan military in the North Kivu in the Eastern DRC. There is also evidence of the involvement of the Republic of Uganda in the conflict. So this one entirely is an African problem. You see, it is also a conflict that is unique in its kind because it's a resource-based conflict. It is a conflict that is showing a betrayal of African member states to fellow member states or fellow neighbors in the region in terms of advancement of governance and peace and security agenda. It has been replaced with a pursuit for economic interests. So this is entirely an African problem, a problem that has been engineered by our own African brothers towards other African brothers.
So, in your view, what are the potential consequences of the alleged involvement of the Rwandan army in supporting the M23, and how does it affect diplomatic relations in the area?
There has been efforts mediation efforts by Kenya. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta was doing some mediation in 2022. There's been efforts by the Republic of Angola to do some mediation. There have been isolated efforts by various regional actors. SADC had a meeting on the 4th of November, which yielded nothing. The AU itself is available mechanisms that it's not using. So the potential disaster that we foresee is that there will be, of course, there's been a diplomatic shortfall between Rwanda and DRC, so that it can actually escalate to an armed conflict between these two states, as well as Uganda. So it is a conflict that is brewing, that is growing, that is, I think it's no longer in its embryonic stage, but it is slowly maturing to a full-blown conflict in the entire region, in my view.
So let's talk a little bit about those arms or those hands that are beyond the borders of each country, that are involved in the conflict in specific countries. And again, it comes back to Rwanda, which has been accused of funding the M23 rebels and obviously playing a part in that conflict. Does that make the process of conflict resolution that much more difficult?
Certainly, the process of conflict resolution is quite difficult at this stage, because if you look at the involvement of the M23 in the Eastern DRC, is that they've been committing war crimes. They've been violating the provisions of the UN Charter. You know, in 2008, the UN Charter passed a resolution that rape of women, children, all forms of sexual violence, and constitute war crimes. It constitutes crimes against humanity, or can constitute an act with respect to genocide. So we realize that there has been serious violations that does not only need a mediation, but also need accountability. So the conflict is actually becoming more complex than one would think. So it is quite difficult at this stage, because the victims of conflict need justice. Justice is accountability, and accountability entails that addressing those who are funding this military rebel group. It also addressing those who are indirectly involved in this conflict, so that the victims of violence, particularly women, children, over 5 million people have been displaced. People have lost homes, they've lost the land. It's quite difficult at this stage to find a peaceful, sustainable solution to this conflict.
Tendai, thank you for speaking to us. Regional governance expert Tendai Mbanje.